TOPLOBSTA Productions.
We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous.
Oh yeah, dude. There's some Nephilim shit.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us fight and be slaves. And everybody's just walking around, head in the clouds, and wanna wake up to a dead in the grave. But then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days.
Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government releasing poison in the air.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo. Welcome to Take Two.
Back.
Welcome back again, guys, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That is TOPLOBSTA, the father of disinformation. Are we going to do the paywall thing? What are we doing with these people?
Yeah, we're going to do it like normal, like as if nothing happened.
Okay, we're going to pretend that nothing happened at all. Guys,
as a matter, don't even mention it. They don't deserve the explanation from us. We're here
if you
on
know,
time.
you know.
If you know, you know.
If you know, you know. Guys, this is a 30-minute preview only. Sometime around the 30-minute mark, we'll be going live exclusively to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad, where you can continue enjoying this show, an ad-free viewing experience, gaining access to the episode before the general public, and you can do it for free. That's right, guys. Sign up for a 7-day free trial and try to jack as much of our content as you possibly can, and then get out of there before the billing cycle kicks in. But it's a lofty goal because we got a lot of content hanging out at patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. Joining us today is D for the second attempt, actually. For the second time today, we are joined by D, and this is going to be a really fascinating conversation. We're going to get into the UAP, UFO disclosure, I'm sure. We're going to talk a lot about crop circles, which is something that we haven't really delved into at any meaningful length here on the show. And but we're going to do that with D. Before we do, let's talk a little bit about where people can find you and what it is that you focus on.
You can find me on Substack.itcan'tbepeople. It can't be people. Substack.itcan'tbepeople.com. That's where I do all of my articles, which I publish normally weekly, and they're based on my experiences as a retired maker of crop circles and exclusive interviews that I've conducted with other crop circle makers that have trusted me, that I've known over the years. And we focus on high strangeness events, synchronicities, and paranormal activity, which occurs during, before, and after the making process.
Interesting. So when you say crop makers, you're saying like people that grow crops, or are you saying that people that do crop, do people do crop circles recreationally, or is it like, is it a fun thing to do? What are we doing here?
You've unconsciously actually opened a bit of a minefield there, because the ones that I'm focusing on are made by people, but there is a distinction, because you do have people like pranksters, hoaxsters, people that make them for wrong reasons. They make them because they're poking fun at people, they're poking fun at the tourists, but then, or they do them as art, which is fine. But then you've got another subsection, which I hope I fell into, which is people that have got interest in the paranormal, pre-existing interest in ufology, and they have been making crop circles to well, we don't know. We sometimes think that we're that there's some sort of exertion to do it. I mean, when I was compelled to do it, and I did it without any ego, and that's why I'm not on camera today, because it's not about ego, it's about the circle speaking. So you've got hoax crop circles, and you've got ones made by people for the right reasons, but you've also got there is an element of crop circles that we can't explain. So there is hope out there, guys. But
it's fascinating that they call it crop circles too, because these things, D, they take like a pretty vast variety of shapes and sizes and even information. I always just thought that was funny because crop circles, I guess, is how the conversation started, but what that phenomenon has developed into over the years far exceeds like circles.
Again, you've just absolutely opened up what I was just about to say, okay, which is great because the original crop circles were based on the Australian tully nests from the 1970s, which did resemble birthed UFOs. They were circular crushings in the grass. And then in the late 70s, 80s, we started to see the same thing. So that we had these big circular markings in the grass, some which looked like birthed UFOs. Sometimes they'd have the little dots round them, so they look like the spacecraft landing gear from the day the Earth stood still, that 50s sci-fi trope. But you're right, because what happened in 1990 when we saw our first crop circle, which was a picture, the whole polemic of birthed UFOs should have been blown out the water right then, because nobody envisages a UFO looking like, you know, two circles joined together with spokes and door keys coming off them. But what had happened was the imagery between UFOs and crop circles was so strong in the public psyche that suddenly it turned from birthed UFOs to messages from our space brothers. There was this clunky changeover because the public didn't want to disassociate UFOs with crop circles. So it's a very important point you're making there.
That's fascinating. I mean, I feel like crop circles had a real resurgence in, I don't know what you would call it, not like pop culture, but well, maybe you could use that expression, with the show Signs, right? That was a huge, I love that movie. Great movie by M. Night Shyamalan and Mel Gibson. But in that, I think they did a great job of capturing some of the bewilderment that comes along with these crop circles, right? Because you said there is an element of pranksters and hoaxsters that take part in this sort of a process. But if the movie Signs is true, and that's where I get all my information is Hollywood films, then there's a real difference in a hoaxsters and then like what we would call a genuine crop circle. And it's that the craftsmanship in executing these things far exceeds what you suspect individuals with boards and rope are capable of. And I remember in Signs, one of the things they highlighted was the ability to bend over a stalk of grass without actually snapping it. And so these things, as amazing as they are, there's definitely two discernible classes. I imagine that people probably get pretty good at them and they figure out their tricks and how to execute them in a way that is, very considerable. But then there's something else beyond that. For example, I have this image here, and I don't even know if there's any real veracity to this. No, not the image of Signs, Top. This one right here. I'm going to bring this up. Boom.
Got it.
So this was in, I mean, this is something I've been aware of for a long time, and I don't even know if it's true. But the story goes that we sent some information into space. And that information, actually don't know if this is the proper one. This might not be the one that I'm looking for.
It's not the one.
Here it is. I have the one that I'm looking for. This is
the oblong
fantastic.
that you're talking about. Yeah, the message that it was the reply.
Yeah. So here, I want to bring this up on stage actually, because this is fascinating. So we sent a bunch of information into space, and that information was of a particular nature. It was the genetic makeup and the sort of atomical makeup of a human being. I think it even included some form of like the Da Vinci Man or something like that in order to. So check this out here. I got it right here. Sorry guys. Let's share this tab instead. And Top, you want to bring that up on stage? Okay, that's great. Up. So this is the response that we get. Is this correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So what do you make of this one?
Well, that was done at Crabwood, which is near Winchester. Now, it's a deep question to answer, and the reason for this is this: that could well be made by people, but, and this is the big but, we do think that there is something else at play. Okay, because the whole of the subject with human crop circle makers is just littered with smoke and mirrors. Not that we're creating, but there's synchronicities. We have dreams, and And there's a lot of strange things that go into play that the public don't see in and around the creation of crop circles. And if I could just move away and just tell you a story, it should link back to what we're talking about. And that was that when I made my first crop circle, I went in as a believer. Okay, I hated people like me. I held that the human crop circle makers in absolute disdain, and my opinion was that the mystery was deep enough. And the analogy that I use is the magician with the cups under the balls. It's difficult enough as it is, and then some idiot comes along and adds another 10. And I held these people in disdain. But when my background was in ufology. When I first saw Close Encounters as a young child, it absolutely blew me away. It looked like I was remembering something rather than seeing something for the first time.
Interesting.
But yeah, that is interesting. And I started. Well, what I decided to do, because I was a ufologist, I thought, okay, look, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to Wiltshire, which is where the hub of the crop circles are. I'm going to just see if I can get to the bottom of this mystery, which is quite an ego-driven thing to do, because why should you get it and no one else has got it? But in my first couple of weeks, I started to hear stories from the community to say that odd things were happening around the creation of crop circles. And they weren't saying they were made by people. They said around the creation of the crop circle, we've seen that there were orbs seen, there's UAPs seen, there's pink lights, there's like circular orbs, like scoping the circles and sweeping over them. But at no point were humans brought into the mix. And then when I started to get into these people trust, that they then said, look, this is happening with human-made circles that are made with the right intent, and there's something bigger going on here. So to get back to your original point, sometimes we'll go to make a particular crop circle, and we'll go to the field to make it, and then we'll see that somebody else has already got there and made that actual same motif that we were going to put into the crop. And that's when you think, is there something else at play here? So even if that is man-made, the bigger question there is, was there something else at play? Why did the makers go and do it? Is there a backstory to this? And I hope that answers your question.
So just for clarification,
that poses more questions. I mean,
yeah, it will do. It is a rabbit hole, guys, and it's a rabbit hole that I've lived in for the past 20 years. The second that you insert humans into this equation, it makes the birthed UFO polemic look almost boring. There's something else at play. And when I found out that it was people on many of these circles, I was very disappointed for about 10 minutes. And then I thought, hold on, if you put people into this, the mystery is actually 100 times bigger than you think it is.
It's interesting because I feel like a lot of our work, I guess we call this work, what we do on this show. It's a lot of fun, but it is kind of work. But a lot of our studies have kind of been pointing at this, and what I'm assuming is there any aspect of channeling when this is happening?
I get this all the time. Okay, now somebody's just left a really nice, very long comment on a YouTube video, on an interview that I did 2 weeks ago. And they say it is. Now, I'm reluctant to call it channeling in that it just hints that the circle makers are in some way anointed and better than you, and we're chosen and we're the chosen ones to do it. Okay. What my opinion is this, as I just said to you before, I've got a deep interest in ufology, got a deep interest in the paranormal since when I was a child. I think that if you align yourself to the phenomenon, you then attract the phenomenon. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I don't think we're channeled. I mean, a circle maker said to me once, this is a game of chess, but we're not playing it, we're the pieces. So we do think that there is something else going on. But what we can't work out, guys, is whether we are actually communicating with each other through the collective consciousness, through the species field, or whether there's something else at play which is triangulating between us and it, if you see what I mean. Man. So, because if you go to a circle and you find out somebody's already done it, then you think, is that us talking to each other, or is there something else above? You know,
We're having a very similar experience. I would file away under that category where we seem to continually step into ideas that I wouldn't say we came up with on our own. We kind of stumbled upon, and then you'll watch that idea immediately spread like wildfire on social media and among other like conspiracy podcasters. And, you know, you're left to go like, are somehow people stealing our information? Or is it more likely that there's something about the nature of an idea, and when it comes to you, it also comes to other people, which then gives ideas some form of independence.
Here's the thing. So
I think that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, it's so the collective consciousness idea, or all right, I'm gonna get into it, but I see you started your Substack 5 months ago. That's when you launched it.
Yeah.
And how old is your book? How long ago did you write your book?
I'm writing it now. It's the Substack is like the bones of it, because I'm still. The thing with this, guys, is this: because a lot of what we do is based. I'll give you another example, and this will blow your heads a little bit. I had a situation when you go out and make crop circles. Initially, you're part of a bigger team. You're just a foot soldier. You're just a stomper. Okay.
Can I just ask, and this could just be a yes or no, D? When you set out to do these crop circles, is this a form of communication? You're hoping something sees. Are you hoping to impart a message when you do that?
I know of one particular prolific crop circle maker who had missing time as a child, and he has spent the rest of his life making these crop circles to try and re-engage with it.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry, just to go back. So you created this 5 months ago, and then you reached out to us on our email, the Nephilim Death Squad at gmail.com. You guys can reach out to us with stories or whatever you want. And I was actually with David. We were with our kids and our wives in the park, and the email comes through. I said, "Oh, this sounds really interesting." And so I presented to him, like, "Yeah, let's talk to him." And we scheduled this with you, but we have all been touching at this, just poking at this subject that the exact subject you were talking about, but all from all different angles. And then you fall in our lap seemingly out of nowhere. So how did you hear the show?
I'm totally with you. Okay. And I vet who I communicate with before I make the approach, and I looked at your stuff and I thought, well, I think you're like-minded people, but obviously we are dealing with a subject where people don't want to know that it's humans involved in making a proportion of these crop circles. Okay. But I just had a vibe that's the answer. And what's also interesting and connecting to what you're saying is when I've gone to interview crop circle makers for their accounts, and all of our accounts are the same thing. A few of them have said, I was going to do that. I was going to do that book, you know, and then I looked back to my situation 5 months ago and I go, why the fuck am I doing this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it brings a lot of heat. Okay. And I've got a lot to lose. But I thought, why did I get the idea to do that? And why are the 5 other circle makers that are going, oh my God, I was going to do that. So it's exactly what you're talking about.
You know, to your point too about how human beings, we don't want to think that people are involved with the crop circles. And, you know, I imagine it's because for a moment it kind of dilutes what you think is like really a spiritual phenomenon or an extraterrestrial phenomenon, and then somehow it waters that down to have human beings. But then, as you said, when you take a closer look, it actually becomes much more compelling and dynamic. But I have gotten to this place where I look at this UFO phenomenon, the abduction phenomenon, and I recognize that there is a huge human element to it, not just the humans that are being taken, but there seems to be a mutually beneficial, like working in tandem sort of a thing that is taking place. So I don't think you can separate the human element at all from whatever's happening with crop circles, with UFOs and all of this stuff.
Well, certainly the area that we're making in, which is like the hub of Wiltshire, we're making around these ancient Neolithic sites like Stonehenge and Avery and the Long Barrows. And again, without being egotistical, I don't want to be, we think that we are basically reinvigorating the work of our forebears that built those stone circles that let's face it, they were far more attuned than we are. Okay.
Yeah.
And when I used to go to the first, I've just written this actually. The first time I went to Wiltshire, the first thing I thought was not I'm here. I thought I'm back home. And I wasn't sure if that connected to the collective consciousness, but what I think it means now is that I was connecting to a resonance in this area, which reminds me and reminds us collectively how clever we used to be in the old days, you know, and how more attuned our chakras were opened. You know, we weren't as we are now in this sterile world.
Right.
But we think that our ancestors that built these stone circles were right in it. Okay, so that their chakras, their third eyes, their pineal glands were open, and you know it's like back to nature thing, you know, because the strangeness that I'm going to talk to you about dissipates the further away you get from these sites. Because I've spoken to crop circle makers that have made in Italy and abroad and further up north in England, and nobody experiences the stuff that we're going to talk about today. It just seems to be central to this ancient area.
Well, what was happening at Stonehenge back in the day, if you will? What was this site used for?
Well, we think it was a pagan site. I mean, it's also much of it isn't there now, guys, because the stones have gone. But the ones that are left, we know that there's certainly an element of it being a calendar, because on the summer solstice, the sun hits this particular stone, and then it just lights up the rest of it like an illumination. And it's just at that particular point of the summer solstice. And there's other windows, and this is in the pyramids as well. The sun hits a certain point, and then you've got this completely lit amphitheater. So we think that it was a calendar, but we think that it was a place of, not just a place of worship, but a place of recognition where our forebears are just celebrating something within that area, because we've got the ley lines here as well. And it's the same with Avebury as well. And the thing you've got to look at is, again, the question is why. I mean, they were lugging rocks, hundreds of tons, you know, and they think it took like years and generations to make. And then you've got to go, why? Why is it there? Why have they gone to that much effort to do it?
That's much of the conversation when it comes to any of our megalithic structures. It's like wildly speculative as to how they achieved it, and then it almost is the primary question, and what's secondary or maybe even third is the why. You know what I mean? It's like how and who, but the why is an afterthought in very many instances.
Yeah, what's also interesting is that I mean, when you hear reports of UAPs and orbs being seen over crop circles, guys, this stuff has been here for thousands of years, and it was here before the crop circles. So people say sometimes, well, I saw orbs form with a crop circle. I saw a crop circle, then there were orbs over it. That's not to say those two things were connected. I know people that go on night watches and they see all sorts of, and it's not connected with crop circles. It's just the area that we're in. But
you may have talked about it when I got kicked off. So if you've already touched on this, then forgive me. But what do you make of that video? That I would say, as far as virality in relation to crop circles, this one is really up there, and it's these orbs that are flying around.
Yeah, I know.
What do you think of that?
Yeah. Well, I'm afraid I've got to go back to the magicians and the cups analogy again. You know, and it's they say that the technology wasn't around at that time to make that through CGI, but I just say two words: Jurassic Park. It's the identity of the person that did it. His name wavers between John Waby and John Maybe, which is a play on words. But even if you look at his IMDb, it says crop circle hoaxer, and there are a lot of unanswered questions about that video. And we've got to bear in mind also that is the one singular example we've got of crop circles being made by orbs.
As far as I've seen, yeah, I would.
It's the only one there is. Okay, but all I've got to say is go and do your own research, and you'll find that that is a little bit of a wormhole. Okay. I do know some, but again, this is apocryphal. It might not be true, but I heard a story that this CGI director went to somebody within the crop circle community, a quite a prominent name, and said, "Listen, I'm going to make this video," and this particular person said, "Well, are you doing it as a demonstration?" And he said, "No, I'm doing it for a laugh, to poke fun." And this person said, "I want no part of it." But that could be apocryphal. But the jury is out on that. The jury is definitely out on that video.
What do you think is, because the nature of these things and the way that they pop up, and I'm sure, it's not that you have answers, but maybe some information that would allow you to speculate as to how these things develop. They seem to develop very rapidly over the course of just one night. And it leaves people totally confused about it when it comes to the sheer scale.
Okay, we've got to go back. We've got to go back to the birth of the phenomenon. Okay, and that was when the single circles were being made. You had these two guys called Doug and Dave, and they were a couple of old guys that used to make pretty basic crop circles, on the way home from the pub. Okay, but they go now. I mean, they're both dead now, but even they question their own motivations as to why they did it. But unfortunately, what happened was that we then had that whole two pissed guys home from the pub trope, which has now plagued us for the past 40 years. When in actual fact, human-made crop circles that are made by people with intent and focus, and they've got spirituality, and they're doing it for the right reasons, which then attracts, this other phenomenon, perhaps. They're very focused. They're not drunkards, guys. You've got to remember that the crop circle season is only between like April and September at the very most. They've got the rest of the year to actually plot out what they're going to do or receive their ideas, if that's your mindset. You just scale it up. So if you're making a very large, complicated circle, you can go out with a team of 15 people and do that. If they all know what they're doing and there's no weak links in the chain, as long as it's plotted out properly, there's no reason why what you would consider to be definitely impossible to be made by man to be made by people, because you're looking at the two drunk guys in the pub, So that's my answer to that.
Yeah, after COVID-19, I think the idea of a conspiracy being like, well, there's just too many people involved and you would never be able to pull it off. It was like, I don't know. I watched them do this to the entire world.
Right.
The sickness, the disease was real, but like the ramifications and the propaganda were certainly pushed in a certain way where it was the largest campaign you've ever seen. So I don't think that this is beyond the pale of people getting together and doing this. The question is why? And I think also the more interesting question would be, they're getting this notion to do it now. Do this design, do it now, do it here. And that's a question I think you're asking still, right, D?
It goes a little bit deeper in that this phenomena attracts accidents and little mistakes. And we think with certainly the ones that were done with the right intent, there seems to be engineering going on of some description where we'll go and make a design. Now, the beauty of this is you're the audience. You never know what it's going to look like until it's done. Sometimes we'll go into make a design. We'll make a design. We'll make a mistake, and we'll have to either replicate that mistake 4 times to make it look like it's supposed to be there, or we'll have to tailor. We'll have to, null the formation up and change it, and we've got to actually come out with a different formation than what we went in to make. Now, and then we'll find out afterwards that revision or that mistake is actually the most important part of that circle, because it's relevant to that particular town that we made it in. Sometimes we'll go to make a formation in a certain place. The car will break down, or the road will be blocked, or something else, and then the team leader will say, "Oh, let's just do it here instead. And then that random place that we've picked is of colossal significance for some reason or another that was oblivious to it, that was oblivious to us at the time. And then we think, well, hold on a minute, how much of this is a mistake or the wrong turn? You know, I know people that have made wrong turns and then something fantastic's happened. And to give you just one more example, what happened to me once that was absolutely crazy was that I had just started making them with my own teams. I was, for the first few, I was just a foot stomper. You're just like a pawn. You're just like a foot soldier. But I had dreamt 2 designs in my mind, and I had this recurring dream, and it was always me swooping over these 2 fields in Wiltshire. It was a part of Wiltshire I didn't know. And I always in my dreams, there's 2 designs in the fields next to each other. And then I thought the only way that I'm going to get rid of this dream is to actually go and do it. So I was driving once and I just took a wrong turn. Oh, sorry. The other thing was, in the dream, I had a school friend with me that I haven't thought of for 30 years. And I'd wake up and think, why the hell is that guy in my dream? I've got nothing to do with him now. And then I took a wrong turn down this road and I found myself exactly in this landscape that I've been dreaming about. It was exactly that. And then I saw that the name of the road that I turned down by mistake was the name of the road that this kid had lived in when I used to go around his house at school. And that, like, I went, oh my God, why? That's crazy. And I couldn't decide which of these 2 designs to put down. So I phoned my partner and I phoned the team. I said, look, I've got two designs here. They're both 4 hours work if we have a team of 6. They're both, you know, good, completely different designs. Which should I do? And nobody could tell me. So I said, well, let's do one then. So I went to the field and I kind of like Luke Skywalker did. I emptied my mind and thought, I will just let it come down. And whichever is the first stomp, that's the circle that I'll make. So I made a circle, I emptied my mind and got this circle made. And the next day, I got a phone call from my partner in London, and she said, gosh, you were busy last night. I said, yeah, we've got a really good circle down. I said, we've got the first one down. And she said, no, you didn't. I said, yeah, I said, yes, we did. She goes, you got them both down. I said, no, we didn't. And what had happened was, between the 2 fields, there was this big slope. There was this big hill where we couldn't see the other field and they couldn't see us. But if you looked on Google Earth from above, it looked like the 2 fields were next to each other. And both of my designs were down in adjacent fields. And the other team didn't know about us, and we didn't know about the other team. And that's when I started to think really seriously, what's going on and why? There's some manipulation, or there's something going on where we think it's our decision and there's something else going on.
You mentioned that this came to you in a dream.
Yeah.
And when we say channeling, you know, when you think of channeling, sometimes you think of like a deliberate channeling, like an oracle, somebody who's been selected by like a priest cast,
a guy
priest
like
class.
Shaman, yeah.
We use that term a little bit loosely here because I don't think that channeling happens in a way where there is intent all of the time, or at least not fully informed intent.
Tell them about Marzinski.
Well, I mean, not only Marzinski, but I'm thinking about all the different artists and whatnot who have attributed their great works to the muses in one way, shape, or form, right? You have like a Stephen King who is in a state of inebriation and most of his ideas for his books are coming to him in dreams. And then all of a sudden you see that there is some real consistency when it comes to the way he tells stories and how those stories overlap with occult esoteric ideologies. To the point where they're accurate if you believe in that sort of thing, in which case this is much more than just a random dream. You're getting some sort of information. But before we even go on to the Marzinski thing, I would be really interested, D, in knowing what do these designs, do they ever have like something that you had hoped to impart on somebody who would see them? Is there information embedded into the designs, or do you just see them, or your team or anybody who sets out to do these things? Are they just designs that they feel inspired to create, but don't necessarily have, let's say, like an embedded message.
Well, you've got obviously the ones that celebrate the land directly, which you've got the yin yang symbols, you've got the mandalas, you've got the universally accepted images. And you've actually made a very good point here, because we are using eightfold geometry. I don't use that. I was never that good, but we're using sacred geometry. Okay. And the fact that we are implanting it in sacred sites, makes the experience all the more important for the people that are coming afterwards. So that's another reason why there's no authorship. That's why people say to us, well, if I was that great at doing this, I'll be shouting it from the rooftops and like making films of it. The second that ego becomes part of the equation, all of the potency of that circle disappears. The second that you say, I did that, and you give it authorship, it becomes like deactivated. So to answer your question, yes, of course we're aware of the potency of the images that we're putting down, where we're putting them down, but sometimes we don't, and then we find out from a visitor to the crop circle who's much more advanced in these areas of history than we are, that we've actually done something which is potent to that area. Now that becomes strange, because the people then say, well, this one can't be man-made because it's special for this reason. And our argument is, well, it can, if you just implant people into a bigger mystery. What the researchers say is, well, the significance of that circle and what it did and how it's done means it must be a special one. And we're agreeing with you. Yes, it is special, but you've got to look at the other elements that are at play here. And I'm going to say it again. This is not about ego. I used to detest people like me because I was a true believer. But once I realized that there are crop circle makers that are going out there with the correct spiritual intent, not all of them, then I thought, well, if you give us an even break, there's still a mystery there. And if we can overcome this stigma we've got at the moment, there's a big mystery that could be investigated here.
That element that you described before, D, of like having these recurring dreams where you're flying over the very field that you end up, putting this design in, and then of course even seeing an individual who later on comes into play in reality and waking life, in relation to this very same thing. That sort of thing rhymes with a very similar phenomenon that takes place amongst abductee victims. So certainly the sensation of flying, right, and with a top-down view, people will describe that, and you'll get, I don't know where to necessarily place it, but it's like what starts off as a dream, and you remember like looking down over a field, might, through regressive hypnosis, let's say, which is a lofty and I would say unreliable field of study, but still a curious one, will expand on that dream and then realize that they were actually at a craft and that they were looking down. Also, that there are people in these experiences, whether it's, abduction or something like that, that will come into play later on. And one of the things that always comes to my mind is children in particular who experience the abduction phenomenon will sometimes talk about seeing people there, friends from school, let's say, or maybe even kids they don't know, but then later on in real life, in waking life, will be introduced to these people, and will know them, have a relationship with them in the future.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah, I think the important thing to tell you about that particular example with the school friend was that I had no reason to think of that school friend at all. Okay, I had no connection with them for 30 years, but it's just the fact that the house that they lived in, the name of the road was the same road that I went down by mistake, and that was my signal to actually take it further. But certainly, I totally agree with what you're saying. I totally agree. But I also, and this kind of works into the UAP phenomenon. I'm very interested in primarily the work of Jacques Vallée and John Keel. And I'm very interested in the idea of cultural tracking. And do you know what that is? Because it's more
Cultural
of a 70s
tracking.
thing.
No, I'm interested in knowing what that is. But before we actually cross that line, we're at the 41-minute mark, and I regret to inform all of our live viewers that we are now going live exclusively to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad if you want to continue enjoying an ad-free viewing experience, hanging out in the chat, and also gaining access to this episode before the general public, then patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad is for you, and you can sign up for free, guys. Sign up for the 7-day free trial and not only gain access to this episode, but all of our backlog content. Otherwise, we will catch you on the flip side. D, yeah, why don't you explain that a little bit to us? Because I'm not very familiar with that.
It is really relevant to people that are moving away from the ETH, that are moving away from the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Okay, so a lot of ufologists that start off, they talk about the Adamski ships, they talk about nuts and bolts craft. As they progress into the subject for decades, they say something else comes into play, which is more to do with our own psyche. I know that Carl Jung was very interested in the fact that we were seeing circles, and that is actually connected to the human psyche. What Jacques Vallée discusses is the fact that what we are now seeing is as abductions were seen by our ancient ancestors as being away with the fairies. You'd see the stories of people that have been taken by the fairy people and the leprechauns, and they're gone for days, and they come back and they're a different age. Jacques Vallée argues that this is the same phenomenon, and what the phenomenon does is it tracks where we are within our evolution, and then places a trope just ahead, 10 years ahead of us. Okay. Now, my contention is that where we are now seeing UAPs and UFOs in Wiltshire, they've always been there, but we called them Will-o'-the-Wisp, or we called them the fairy lights back 500 years ago. Right. So we are looking at the same phenomenon here, which has probably existed with us since the dawn of our own inception, and it tracks where we are and very cleverly puts itself in an immediate future that we will understand.
Interesting. Now
a rebranding of sorts,
right?
What you're saying.
You might call it a
it's
rebranding.
Just so that you can keep track with it based on where you are in your evolution.
Interesting. Yeah. So I would agree with that, and I'm actually looking for it right now. I can't find it, but we did an interview with someone in the past, and I wanted to be able to say his name here. I don't know if Top remembers it, but it was a gentleman. We just talked about him recently, had the same issue where I couldn't remember his name. And he was talking about this this abduction phenomenon and how he believes that it is not a physical phenomenon, that it's actually a spiritual one that's masquerading as a physical one. Now, you can do with that information what you will, but what I do recognize is this growing body of information that suggests that at least the physical aspect of this, meaning a craft and let's say, alien grays, that they may actually be themselves a form of technology that is deployed on some level by human beings. Now, that's not to say that there's no spiritual influence. And this goes back to that sort of inspiration that seems to come from elsewhere, not in our own minds.
Are you talking about John Joseph?
John Joseph, thank you. Is it John Joseph?
I think so.
Yeah, John Joseph, I'm pretty sure. Bald beard?
Yes,
okay. John Joseph. Shout out John Joseph. So I do suspect that there's an element that is, and if you feel more comfortable exchanging spiritual, well, let's just say like ethereal or something that is energetic, that isn't, physical in the way that we're familiar with, could be inspiring people, and that these grays in this craft may actually be, and I do think there's room for some of these craft actually being not technology, not created by human beings, maybe some sort of living plasma or something like that, not too sure. But it does seem that a bulk of the phenomenon may actually be human beings creating these things at the behest of some sort of inspiration that is spiritual or ethereal.
Yeah, I understand. I do understand.
What do you think about that? Because I know you're talking quite a bit about the human element, but what you're interacting with that is nudging you and inspiring you to do these things, have you got a framework for that in your mind as to how to define that thing?
Well, it's the muse, isn't it? But then you've got to question. This is the original point, which I don't understand. I don't understand whether we are communicating with each other, where we can make a crop circle in one field and the other team don't know about us and they're doing the other one we wanted, or whether there is a triangulation. or whether, as John Keel says, there is like this frequency that can be used by a lot of different things, and those things could include our collective unconsciousness and something else external. He talks about the fact that the example he uses is one of those old radio dials where, you know, you've got that needle on the station. You're in that station. You think that that is the only station that exists because you're in it. Okay. But were that needle to be a little bit wider, you don't turn it. If it was a little bit wider, you'd start to get little messages from other stations as well, which we would then interpret as being spirits or whatever. So it does also, I think, depend on how open you are to receiving it. I honestly think that I when I speak to crop circle makers that have had mind-blowing experiences, almost all of them have had latent psychic abilities, or they've had a history of, you know, missing time or something that attunes them to the phenomenon and makes them want to go and create these things. Because
have you found a correlation at all? Because you seem to have found a correlation between people who are engaging with this phenomenon and people who have latent psychic abilities. Have you noticed a correlation between those people and childhood trauma?
With one of them, yeah. But the thing is, you got to realize, guys, is that sometimes when you're out in the field, you could have worked with this guy for 10 times in different circles, but you don't know enough about them to delve that personally. You know,
right, of course.
Yeah. It's not polite. We're there to do a job.
Making crop circles in the middle of the field and be like, "Hey, how was your childhood? Any rough patches?
Did you see any owls when you were a child? Yeah.
Big white owls. No, never mind. I'm gonna keep on trudging over here. Another question for you, because a topic of interest for us lately has been the telepathy tapes. Have you caught wind of these?
No, not yet. No.
Okay, after this episode, go ahead and listen to every single one, because it's exactly what you're talking about. This lady Kai Dickens is doing experiments on nonverbal autistic children, but not experiments in like the MK Ultra sense, or at least we would think at first. She's just going and she's trying to dispute their claims of having telepathy with their parents, and she's failing because
she's
these
having
kids
a rough go of it.
A rough go. They seem to they can't really communicate, and they're kind of trapped in their own bodies, and they can't really. Some of them aren't. There's a lot of shaking of arms, and there's not much like cohesion, physical cohesion with they're severely autistic kids, but they're guessing numbers, like 4-digit numbers that their mother is seeing in a different room, and they're guessing it within a second of her seeing it. There's also the story goes on to talk about this place called The Hill, which is kind of interesting, where these nonverbal autistic children go and they congregate and they learn and they speak to each other. So like there's been cases of, I forget one of the guy's names, has like a French name, but he's communicating with somebody across the world, and it was confirmed by the parents that they meet up later on, like they know everything about each other. And so there's a level of telepathy, there's a level of this the idea of the collective consciousness that you're talking about. They mentioned that in this show as well, but there's a lot of other nefarious activities going on. You mentioned a radio wave, which is also brought up in this podcast, but our research brings us to more man-made ideas of how this radio wave signal can be manipulated and can be used to transmit messages into people's heads. And the guy Andrija Puharish was developing something like this with a dental tooth implant, where they were actually using that to do kind of voice to skull technology. So this stuff does track. It tracks directly in line with not only this the idea of the alien phenomenon, or this the extra dimensional extraterrestrial beings communicating, but also the human interference in what we're seeing here. And is this all organic? Are we doing this ourselves? Are we being pushed in a certain way? Is there a certain genotype that is susceptible to this kind of stuff? Like, we're looking at it now, trying to uncover that, because it's seeming that way.
Do you have are they departing any messages back?
What, to the makers or to the visitors?
Let's say the visitors, right? You guys are going out, you're inspired to do these things, and some of the things that you do, in hindsight, end up having really huge significance in the information that ends up, being imparted by these designs that you guys are making.
It's not okay. I'm with you. Again, I don't think it's to do with the actual specific design. Some of the time, there's you do make crop circles that you find out are of particular significance to just one person. And there's a tendency to say, "Oh, that they made that for me." You just think they're conceited or they've got egos. And then you sit down, and I've got a really crazy story about a journalist that I used to know, and he come over to do a piece on wonderful Wiltshire, not connected to crop circles specifically, but included in there. And he was about to depart the next day, and his wife said to him, what's the best present that you could get before we go home? And he said, let's have a crop circle in the back garden. Okay. And of course, there was one the next day for them. But then I found out that team had intended to make that crop circle in that space 3 weeks before that couple had even arrived in the UK. And then your mind starts to scramble because you think, well, there's some sort of time discrepancy there as well. But there was also a situation where I knew a crop circle maker who was in bed, and at 12 o'clock dead, because he looked at his clock, he felt like he'd been roughly awakened by the shoulder. He said it was an external awakening. It wasn't me waking up. I felt like I was being shaken, and I felt a presence in the room. And he had this image of crop circle, and it was basically saying, you have to go and make this thing right now. It has to be done in this field right now. And he thought to himself, well, I can't get a team together because it's midnight. So whatever I do, it's got to be small. And this thing wouldn't go. In the end, he went, all right, already, I'll go and do it. And he got his kit together. He walked. He couldn't drive because he had a couple of glasses of wine earlier in the day. So he walked with his kit, which is stupid, to do that, without a car anyway. And he went to make this crop circle in a particular field that wasn't the field that he was supposed to go to. And he felt nauseous, and it felt like this thing of, no, don't trick us. He's got to be here. So he walked half a mile or a mile, made this crop circle by himself, which was beyond his capabilities, but he managed to get it done. And he basically fell asleep on the spot. He was knackered because obviously if you're having a crop circle that's a 4-man job for 2 hours, if you scale it down to one bloke, it's going to be 3,
Right.
So he was knackered, and he woke up the next day, and there was this group of girls just freaking out. All right. And they were in his crop circle, and he just pretended that he was, a rambler. He hid his boards so that they couldn't see him. So he went back, and they said, what's going on? And they said, well, we asked Mother Nature for a crop circle, and she answered. And he said, what do you mean? And he said, it turned out they were Wiccans, or they were pagans, or they had sympathetic towards paganry. And they said, we asked Mother Nature for this particular crop circle, and she took out this pendant round her neck. And she said, this is what we wanted. And we started to meditate on it. And then Mother Nature answered us. And my friend just went, when did you start doing this? And they went, well, midnight, of course, when the power is as its most potent. And then he told me that story, and I just thought, what the hell is going on?
Why did they want that? Why did they want that specific symbol?
It was relevant to their beliefs, as I recall. It was, the girl had the pendant on, so it was obviously some sort of religious or symbolic significance to her. And
Any recollection as to what the symbol was?
I think it was a flower. I don't quote me. I need to speak to the maker, but I think it was a pretty basic flower of life. Okay. That it's quite basic to do. But he said that the incantation started in his head at midnight and wouldn't go. And when he tried to deceive this thing and go into the wrong field, he then felt really sick until he actually got to the right field and got it done. And he did say this was beyond his capabilities, but he still managed to get it done.
You
So,
and your the people who are doing this, you must spend some amount of time speculating as to the why.
This,
of course,
this logo, this kind of symbol, the
Yeah.
flower of life.
yeah, well, it's some you do because they're basic, okay. But as I said, you go to a circle with a design, and you go, okay, I've been looking forward to doing this all year. Great, let's go. And then someone else has already done it.
Mm-hmm. So you've got to cross this bridge in your mind where you're being, and this is probably an uncomfortable one, dependent upon how you're looking at this, but you're being nudged one way or another, and you're not the only one. Several people are being nudged, and that's evident, right? When somebody else gets it done before, you do, you're
Yeah.
inspired to, but then it's already there. So what have you come up with in regards to the why and what the motivation is?
That's, with honesty, the only answer that I can't answer. The only question I can't answer. And that should tell you that my intent's pure, because otherwise I'd be coming in here with a load of and saying this is what it means. This is the bit we sit down with each other 10 years on, because I'm still in touch with these guys, even though I've been retired for years. And we go, did you ever have something like that? And they tell a crazy story. And we go, I didn't get something like that. I got that. Okay. So we're all experiencing the same things, because when it's synchronicities and dreams, you think that's personal to me. So that must be my imagination, or I'm reading too much into it. Then you step back and you go, right, let's look at this as if you were a skeptic and you were trying to debunk it. And then you go, I can't, because, and then you speak to other people, and we've all had the same experiences. Just these crazy. I had a crazy one where I'm a guitar player, and I was playing the guitar at home, and this riff kind of fell onto my fretboard. I thought, that's nice, and then maybe I wrote that, and then I went to the shops, and then it's playing in the supermarket, and then there was something within the lyric where I listened to it. I thought, that'll make a great, that's a great idea for a crop circle, that lyric. And then it did not leave me alone. And this was it was a one-hit wonder from the 70s. It wasn't in vogue. It hadn't been re-released. It wasn't in a film. I'd be on the bus and a pensioner behind me would be whistling it. I'd go to a quiz night. It would be the first question. My sister said, I picked up some records from this jumble sale, and the first one I picked up was this. I said, don't tell me, is it this record? And it was becoming to the point where it was enough already. Okay. So I went and made this crop circle with the team. It was of significance to where we placed it. And then after that, I never heard the record again, because it was like appeased, so to speak. Now,
you could almost categorize that as like a precognition in some ways, right?
Yes, because also the time that I did it was the date that I placed that crop circle was relevant as well. And it was I kind of just buckled and said, I give in. And when I wrote that story on my Substack, I thought, right, I'm revisiting this now. Is there any point of that where I could have said, this is just in my mind? And then I pick up and thought, no, hold on a minute. I rented a video. It was a VHS video, and that record was on the start of the trailer. It was everywhere, and I haven't heard it since. And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, if you speak to, this is the way that, Carl Jung certainly talks about this, and he talks about being related to the interconnectedness of the UFO phenomena, and so does Jacques Vallée. Jacques Vallée says there is no such thing as a coincidence. It's just the little sister of science, and it's all connected, and we are either attuned to it, or we act on it, or we don't, But there is certainly parallels in ufology with coincidences and synchronicities and dreams that are in crop circles. This is why I think it's all the same thing, and I think that it masquerades as ET, but it's actually much closer to our own consciousness, whether it be interdimensional and external, or something which is within us all, which we're externalizing, if that makes sense.
The reason that I'm asking these questions about, what do you suppose the point is, or what's the motivation, or is there a message that is seemingly being imparted on, anybody that's experiencing this call to go and do this, is because we repeatedly come across this phenomenon, whether it's with ETs or perceived ETs, whatever they actually are, or just spiritual downloads. The telepathy tapes kids will say something to this effect. Puharaj, who we brought up earlier, he's communicating with 9 particular entities called the Ennead, the Egyptian Ennead. They even identify themselves individually by each name that syncs up with the Egyptian Ennead, which is just to say, the Egyptian pantheon. But there was 9 particular ones that were very important. And also, it's the same message that people will get in abduction experiences. And that message is something about not only humanity's ascension, but also a warning about a that's coming. And so I lay that out just to ask you flat out, in your experiences and your communications with people who are also executing these things, maybe not you, because you seem to be somebody who, I don't want to say is playing it conservative, right? We're dealing in a realm that many people would call pseudoscience, so far from conservatism, but you're tempering what you're saying with logic, and you're being careful. I can't imagine that everybody that runs in your circles is that way. Have you ever heard that message of ascension and espoused by any of your peers?
Yeah, I have. But what you've got to consider there is that we are just the instigators. It's for the people that come in afterwards that may be at that the circles are aimed at, rather than us as you see. I mean, we're just the pawns, if you like. Okay, so
messengers.
I think what, again, it's messengers. I think we're just the workmen. Okay, so
right, but somebody else is interpreting these symbols.
Yeah,
and it's meaningful.
It's
to
not
them.
about us. What we say, guys, is really important. We say for the time we're in that field, making this, and we're thinking to ourselves, why am I doing this again? Why am I here at 2:00 in the morning? Cold, tired, but I'm still here. Why am I doing this again? For the time we're making the circle, it's ours. The nanosecond that we all leave that field, it doesn't belong to us in the world. It belongs to the world. So the answer to your question is, that's not for us. It's for the people that come in afterwards.
But you've heard that sentiment from the people that come in afterwards.
I have indeed, but I'm a bit wary, because going back to my ufology studies, what I'm very concerned about is when we had the contactee phenomena in the 50s, where we had the Nordic looking gods with the long hair, and those messages were being imparted then, and that was like 80 years ago, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't. Nothing seems to have happened.
Well, so I'll cue you in a little bit more of our work. The reason that I'm disseminating it the way that I am is because I don't want to make another episode that's enamored entirely by our narrative. But
that's cool.
You have this Elon Musk, for example. He is worried about a coming polar shift. And this is something that seems to exist, and I'm not saying that I buy into this. And in fact, just the fact that Elon Musk is espousing it makes me highly skeptical. But still, the narrative exists that something will happen. It will disrupt our magnetosphere, and magnetic north and south will suddenly switch positions, and that this will cause a chain of calamity here on Earth in such a way as to impact the entire planet. So I have this feeling. Just given his closeness to this situation of like the telepathy tapes, even he just trademarked telepathy for his Neuralink, and then of course Elon Musk himself identifies as autistic, which goes right back to the telepathy tapes again, and so I think that would be the nature. But I was just curious because I imagine you probably have heard something to that effect, but like you're saying here, you guys are the ones who go out and execute it. The interpretation is left up, it seems, for specific individuals, because the way you've been describing it is like these things are almost ambiguous and meaningless to you when you're done, but then one person or a group of people will zero in on it and find a tremendous amount of meaning that is very particular to them. It's very personal.
Don't forget what's really important to bolt onto that is that the importance is often something that we've made as a mistake, or it's not something that's intentional, and the crop circle has ended up different to what it should have been, and yet if we'd have done the first design, it would have meant nothing.
How does that make you feel, D, about your own autonomy in this situation?
I've got mixed feelings about it, because I'm very conscious of what our pop star Robert Williams said when he went to the Skinwalker. He says, "I'm really interested in it, but I don't want to take it home with me."
yeah. That's a valid concern,
effect.
dude.
Have you experienced any like cryptid stuff, UFO stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question, D. It's like, you're doing this. What about the other instances of paranormal activity in your life? Is this happening in a vacuum where otherwise it's just a bright sunny day and you're just going about your life, except for this by nightfall you're inundated by the paranormal and you're out in these fields?
In your house, anything dropping off counters that shouldn't happen, anything like that?
Yeah, I do get little bits like that, but the right side of my brain tells me that it's just not what it is, because I'm scared of it.
Right.
Can I?
That brings
I have to ask you another question really quickly. Can you see the screen share here that I'm showing?
Yeah.
Do any of the? Oh, let me actually show this one. Any of these symbols look like something you've seen on a cornfield, or something?
The one third row to the last. I've seen that.
Third row, all the way at the end over here.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Okay.
Interesting.
Do you know what these are?
No, they look like runes of some description.
Yeah, these are these are sigils from the symbols of the lesser keys of Solomon. So
right.
Solomon, obviously from the Bible, King Solomon, and if like some of the Kabbalistic teachings will and other like mystical teachings show that he summoned 72 entities or demons to erect a temple for him, and the way he summoned them was by creating their sigil and then encircling it. Because if you know these entities' names, you can then entrap them and make them do your will. That's at least that's the mythology behind, or the idea behind these sort of things. So,
but this plays in very well, right, D? It's like, because it's like ancient.
It's like you guys are making these symbols on the ground. You don't know why you're making these symbols, and they have to be precise. And then there is power. Like you said, there's a lot of power if you make this symbol next to a megalithic site. Definitely. But it seems like you're bringing power to a certain site, especially if it's directed. We're like, yo, we need the symbol here right now. Like, is this a summoning? Are you writing a name of something? Are you allowing something to then impart itself in that spot? Does it want to be dropped there?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to what I just said just now about being scared of it. What I meant was, I try and pay reverence and pay deference to the phenomenon and where we're implanting the symbols, because if it is magic, as you know, it can go either way. Okay. And I know people that have made the wrong symbols, and they have had that stuff at home that you're talking about. You know, it's like it's saying to us, it's normally if a crop circle was made to show off to somebody, or as ego, that's when they get the at home. You know,
right?
It's like they're being reminded that it's not about you. You're just like the workman. You know. And don't think that you're any bigger than you are, you know. But I'm very conscious about making people have said to me in the past, make this circle. I'm going to say no, because it's wrong. It looks wrong, and I don't want that in my life afterwards. You know, I really try and make something which is positive for the people that come in afterwards. You know, it's really important.
I think that in these situations, we don't have a lot of tangible physical things to grab onto, right? I mean, this is all happening in almost you wouldn't even call it a telepathic way, because you think that it's your own idea to an extent, right? And only experience would show you over time that maybe that's not the case. But I think when you're dealing with the intangible, and you're dealing with a psychic or a spiritual or an ethereal phenomenon, your impression counts for a lot more than maybe you think. So what I want to ask you, D, is I want to ask you about your feelings on it, particularly whatever seems to be imparting this information. And I don't want to jump to any conclusions. I know you said that you get a little fearful when those things start happening around your house. So I don't want to just jump to the conclusion of you are fearful of these entities. That's not what I'm saying here. But is there a consistent impression or a feeling that you get associated with the thought of, what the nature of these things are, why they're imparting, just any, when you try to look at that?
All right, I'm with you. Well, the first thing I'd say is, and I was asked this question in an interview last week. When I sort of open my mind to it, I don't see entities. I'm just aware of a physical. Sorry, I'm just aware of a metaphysical higher power, and it's something which is ancient, and it's something which is all-knowing, and it's something which is to be respected, and it's not going to get in your way if you don't mess about with it, if you understand what I mean. But I also think, why did I make that? What made me go and do that? Because when I made my first one, this is interesting. I said to my partner, I'm hearing all this stories about supernatural activity. It could be a load of. So the only way that I'm going to know is if I go out and watch it being done. And I got invited to make a crop circle with my first one. I was just part of a team stomping. I was doing nothing artistic. And I said to my partner, I said, I'm going out tonight. I've been invited because they said they'd overheard me saying that I'm interested in what happens afterwards. And I'm going to tell you this, if I don't have anything supernatural happen to me, I will never do this again. And we went out, and it was a 2-stage formation. It had been started the previous night, but they couldn't finish it because they just ran out of day. They ran out of night light, and they because you need the night as your cloak. And so we started to do this.
Are you doing this under a full moon most times?
Oh yeah. Well, ideally, yes. You don't time it with a full moon, but if it is a full moon, I mean, people say, "Oh, you can't do this in the dark." Even if it's pitch dark, your eyes get used to it within 20 minutes. And the second, what people don't realize is when you scribe out a line, that line looks darker than the rest of the crop, so you can see. People say, "Oh, you need flashlights and torches." No, you fucking don't. You don't. Okay, your eyes become very used to it very quickly, and as soon as the line is made, that bit is darker than the rest of the crop. Okay. That is a myth. People say, I can't see how 2 drunk blokes can do this in the dark. It's not. It's 15, and they get used to it very quickly. But anyway, we finished this circle. Nothing happened at all. I thought, this is just a load of hogwash. It's just ego. It's just these guys making these stories up. They're hoaxsters. It's practical jokes. They're putting the wool over our eyes. Everything that I hate about circle makers. And we finished the circle, and the second that we finished it, I looked at the perimeter edge, and by this time the sun was coming up, so you had that grey, that hinterland between night and day. And I saw a flashlight go off, like on an old Polaroid camera, and I thought, because making crop circles is illegal. I mean, it's not a criminal offence, but you can get prosecuted by the farmer, and then you're DBS, then it's a criminal record. It's not good for you if you want to get a job. Anyway, I saw this camera go off. I thought, oh, we've been watched. And then I saw another flash go off, and then another flash go off, and then it was like 12 flashes and then 30 flashes. And what these flashes did, they went from a central point and they proliferated around the edge of the circle until they were surrounding us. And I'd written it in my Substack. I called it the biggest necklace in the world. It was just glistening around us. And I said, what the fuck is that? And the team leader, who was this guy with the missing time, said, don't worry about that. That is just it telling us that it's finished. Don't do anything more to the circle because you'll probably mess it up. It's like a little round of applause. And he looked up and he said, okay, we've done our bit now. Now you go and do your work. And I said to him, who are you talking to? He said, that lot upstairs. And that's when, and he was a very genuine person. And when that happened, I freaked out and thought that I was addicted. I was addicted to doing it after that. And I wasn't doing it for ego. I was just trying to connect with whatever this thing was. And we didn't get a supernatural experience every single time, but 50% of the time, something weird would happen. You know, we'd see UAPs, you'd see a pink light appearing just as we're about to make the crop circle. The first ball stump goes down and there's a pink light, and we think it's a helicopter. Then we realize that we can't hear the rotors, and then we finish the circle and it blinks off. So
a pink light?
It was pink. Yeah. I distinctly remember it because there was a lot of see, this is the other thing, guys. When we make these crop circles in these megalithic areas, there's always big military bases. Every single place we go, there's a big military base, always coincidentally nearby. Okay, so we've been buzzed by choppers. We actually went to make a crop circle once, and this helicopter almost landed in the field we were making it. So we just ran. So we reckon that they must have seen the heat off our engines with their night vision. So I distinctly know it was pink, this light, because I'd attributed it to being a helicopter that had buzzed us a couple of nights before. And it was definitely pink. But we've also seen,
Let me just say, so Philip K. Dick, he's a sci-fi writer, and
I know Philip K. Dick. Yeah.
His experiences started with a pink ray of light, where he's experiencing like extreme gnosis, like a download. And it's also triggered by some sort of dental surgery before or after. I'm not sure. I have to do more research on that. But that's in 1974. So that's kind of an interesting overlap, little serendipitous overlap of possibly seeing or experiencing a similar entity as you.
Also, massive overlap when it comes to these experiences and military bases. That really checks out.
That's a no-brainer.
Way.
They are just everywhere, and they've. And people say, they just use them as GPS markers because it's quite boring doing exercises, flying over the fields and seeing nothing. It all looks the same. So the wing commander would say, go to this GPS, report what you find. It's a crop circle. So I know that does happen. But I've been in crop circles, one during the construction where we had to leg it. With that one, we had to run. Okay, in fact, I think we left the kit there and we had to drive back for it the next day. It was that bad. We had to get out.
Any sightings, from you or other people in these events of things that aren't, mysterious lights, but more like cryptids or something?
What do you mean by cryptid?
Cryptid's like a general term meaning something that seems physical, seems like it might be an animal, but is otherwise unidentifiable. Like like a Bigfoot would be a cryptid, but so would you might actually call like an alien gray a type of cryptid. But you also might say that
I know of one circle maker who saw this like 8-foot high figure in the field. He thought it was another team member. And then he looked, and then obviously he said what happened was he looked to the side, the corner of his eye, and it kind of disappeared. And then but he could still feel it behind him. And everywhere he looked, it was just flitting out of view.
Yeah.
So, and what he said was that he was so scared, he went to hit it with his board, and it just vanished. What? Now, I wasn't sure if I should put that story in my Substack because it's kind of the stuff I don't want to talk about. It didn't happen to me,
right?
But what we had a situation. It's very interesting what you said about the sunlight, because when with this stuff being quite gothic, you associate it with all happening at night, and then in the daytime you think, oh, it's a lovely sunny day, nothing gothic can happen here because the sun's out. I can do what I like. And I went to a crop circle that we'd made the previous night with a relative of mine, and we were walking around, and the wheat crunches when it's freshly, when you're walking in the next day, and we could hear like this crunching of wheat behind us, and it was like this really private detective who was following you, and then like in the films where when you stop, it takes a couple of seconds to stop after you, like in the cartoons,
Yep.
And this kept on happening, and I said to my cousin, are you hearing that as well? And we filmed it actually, and we actually filmed this sound. I said, like, okay, let's walk and let's stop. So we go crunch, 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 stopped, and then crunch behind us. And it was almost as if this thing was using our footsteps to shroud its own as it was going as it was going around, and we filmed it. So I know it happened, and then there was no one else in the circle. And then we both looked. That's the other thing. We both were impelled to look to our right-hand side without saying anything to each other. So that's strange in itself. And we saw this almost opaque shadow over the crop, something bigger than a normal-sized human being would be, but it was a definite figure. And of course, we looked behind, and there's nothing there. And I just said, I'm fucking getting out of here. You know,
It's time to go. That's a good indicator that it's time to go.
Man, you would. I wish we had a more direct line to Tony Merkel for you, because you would be a killer guest on the confessionals. This is
Let me ask you this, D.
what he's looking for.
If I told my wife that I was going out at 2 a.m. to go lay down some crop circles,
well, you wouldn't go at 2. You go at 10, because with 2, you've only got an hour. You've only got an hour.
Right,
of work.
right. You got to get there with enough time to spare. So if I said, "Babe, I'm going out tonight,"
You rookie.
and she said, "What are you doing?" and I said, "I'm going to a field, and I'm gonna go risk, a misdemeanor potentially."
Yeah.
What is her thoughts in all of this as you're going and doing this thing? Because at some point you tell her initially that you're going to go do this, then you realize there's veracity to it, then you continue on this process. What is she thinking through all of this?
Well, it's a really good question, because I stopped, because you've got to write the next.
She wasn't thrilled.
No, she's not as aligned, but that's good. That's a good thing, guys, because it means that I can say this mad thing happened, and she go, "No, it didn't. It's this," and I go, "Oh yeah, actually, you're right." You know, but I've known circle makers that have gone down that road you're talking about, and they've lost stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Because I definitely know of 2 or 3 that I can think of at the top of my head, but I currently thought, well, no, there's other parts of my life that are very positive.
Mhm.
But the strange thing is, when I started to write this Substack, I was starting to get the same phenomenon as I was writing this, as I was experiencing in the field. I'd meet random people that have a story for me, and I thought, how do we get onto crop circles? We're talking about something completely different, you know. So I've been experiencing the same tropes and the same sinks and the same dreams. There's all the same stuff when writing this stuff than I did when I was actually in the field. It's almost as if you're opening yourself back up to it, even though I haven't had a direct line into it for 10 years. Now I've sort of opened myself back up to it. That is happening again.
Opened yourself up to something that wants to be noticed. It wants to engage, it seems, and it wants to be not discovered, but it's certainly not playing covert. Not
Look,
in the straightforward sort of way.
I'm not doing myself any favors by doing this, because obviously I people don't want to think it's humans. They don't want to know. Okay, what I'm saying is, if you just take that step with us, and I'm not saying they're all that way. I'm just saying if in human circles there is strangeness which could be aligned to something else. I'm not saying every single circle is man-made. Okay,
Right.
I'm certainly with those early 1980s ones. I don't know what made those, but what we're saying is, we've got people like me have got a lot to lose by doing these types of shows, because we get trolled, and I've had everything from when I started doing the Substack. I had a message saying, "Okay, how much are the CIA paying you?"
Right.
You know, and you obviously work for the FBI. You know, are you MI5? And you go, "No,
Even
I'm just
besides that, D, right? It's like you're engaging with a phenomenon that science tells you doesn't exist, and just by its nature, it is therefore incredible. And because it's incredible, you can, and I'm sure you've seen people, and maybe even experienced this to a degree yourself, become obsessed with this thing. And then, like you said, you've got good things, right? You've got a wife that you love, and a life that, you'd probably be happy if it continued on in a pretty normal way. And then there's this thing that seeks to disrupt that if you should look too deeply into it. So yeah, I mean, there's it's when people say that you're doing this sort of thing for either, the CIA is one thing, or for like attention. It's like, it doesn't really bring you great attention. Not in a way that
it doesn't bring me any attention. I don't make any money from it.
Right.
The Substack, I invite you guys to go on my Substack. Just subscribe for free, and your listeners. I'm not asking you for money. I'm not saying go behind the wall. Just subscribe for nothing and see what I've got to say, because I'm only echoing the stories that I've had from other circle makers. And time again, a circle maker's given me a story, and I've got, I can't use that, Mr. T, because I've got 10 other people that have told me the same thing. So I'm just using the best, the best one. I've got nothing to gain at all. It's just that we all seem to be having these identical experiences. But I will tell you a funny story that's connected to what you just said. I had a situation where I had a friend who was a crop circle maker, but his friends didn't know that he was a crop circle maker. They just knew that he was obsessed with these things.
All the things, by the way, that you could hide and sort of come out of the proverbial closet with, people think like, I don't know, something has just changed, about Kevin. He's just acting off, and I don't know what it is. And all the things, is it drug usage?
He's tired. Kevin's tired.
Maybe he's tired. Yeah. Is he? And then when he finally reveals it to you, he's like, I've been making crop circles. Like, man, that's a hard one. I don't even know where to put that.
Yeah. But I had this friend, and he was quite obsessive about it. And one day his workmates said to him, you've got to get to this field. There's one of your big corn drawings. It's behind the barn in this field. And he went, well, I can't go now because I'm at work. I'll wait till I've gone to, I'll wait till lunchtime. And the boss said, no, you can go now. It's okay. Go and find your, we'll show you where it is. So he went and he found it and he took pictures of it, and it was brilliant. And he came back and he thought, well, this is quite a turning point, because my workmates obviously, starting to indulge my curiosities. This is progress. So he went back to the office. They were all laughing at him. Saying, oh, did you have a productive day? Yeah. And he goes, yeah, I got pictures of it. And then the whole room just fell silent. And he said, I've got pictures of it. And he had one of those old, cameras with the screen on it. So this is back in the 2000s. And he passed it around, like passed the parcel. He said it was like watching an adult's party game of miserable adults playing pass the parcel, because they all saw this picture. And they all went completely quiet.
Oh,
and then the upshot was that they had collectively invented this non-existent crop circle, and they said he had to go then and there because they knew that if he'd made a few well-placed phone calls, he'd have found out there was nothing there. And of course, he goes, and it was exactly where they said it was going to be. So it was like kind of the phenomena flipping over to the people that were insulting him. Do you understand?
Yeah, that's an incredible, talk about this phenomena having his back.
Yeah, having his back, absolutely.
Having his back, yeah, because otherwise he would have been made to not only look insane, which is probably what they were already assuming, but then he would have been, the ass of all the jokes in the office forever. And instead, this phenomenon goes, I'll show you.
And he said they never made fun of me again.
Yeah, I bet they didn't. I bet they were in the fields with him the next day. D, okay, all right.
Put your boots on, guys.
You strike me as someone who spends quite a bit of time passing this through the analytical mind, right? So much of this is intangible. But I would imagine that after enough experiences, you had to have done research, no?
What type of research? What do you mean?
Well, that's a good question, right? It's like, where does one even start? My question in return would be, where did you start? How did you start? Did you start trying to pull at this thread? Did you get on forums? Did you try to understand this? Did you look at the information that exists? And if so, D, did you find anything that you felt fits?
Well, yeah, it's mainly negative, because when you go on, if you go into a forum and you say, this is a human-made crop circle, but something really strange happened, you just get the trolls, because they don't want to hear it. So if you say, my friend made this crop circle, but as he made it, that there was UAP activity, the second you say, my friend made this crop circle,
it's dismissed.
They jump on you. They jump on you, because unfortunately, this at the end of the day is a business, guys. It used to bring in millions of pounds to the local area. Not so much now, because the proliferation has gone down. Last year was the worst season we've ever had for crop circles. I think there was something like 8, whereas in the heyday, when I was doing them, it was like 60.
Are you saying like tourism, like a town will
Absolutely,
kind of?
of
Oh,
course.
interesting.
We've got bed and breakfast. We've got, there's a lot of money here. Okay, so unfortunately, the money doesn't want any doubt sown in people's minds that it's
Right.
not aliens. So the answer is yes.
bizarre.
I've gone. It is, but that's where we are. So that's how I know about the Oliver's Castle footage. That's very, very dubious, very dubious. Okay, but unfortunately, because it fits into confirmation bias and it fits into their narrative, they're going to believe it. And they say to us, "Why don't you film yourselves making a crop circle?" Now that's happened a few times. But you have to sacrifice the circle to do that because there's authorship. Okay, so we'll say, okay, you want it? We'll send you. We'll do a time lapse, full make, and we'll post it. And then what do they say? It's fake. Or how do we know they're people? They look like greys. You can't win.
Right.
It's interesting because you have like the modern archaeological sites where they're falling all over themselves to say humans made this stuff. There weren't giants doing any of this, even though, in Peru, they're like, no, these megalithic structures were created by a race of cannibalistic giants.
Yeah.
But it's the opposite with crop circles. They're like, this is definitely aliens. People had nothing to do with this.
The paradox that we've got here, guys, is I've never seen this paradox in any other subject. The spiritually awakened people, the supposedly spiritually awakened people will say to us, we are human beings. We are being suppressed. We are not allowed to know what our full capabilities are in case we rise up against our oppressors. We can do this. We can do that. We can fly. We can do this. Oh, but we can't flatten corn in pretty pictures,
Yeah.
Because it goes against the narrative. The first time I went to a crop circle, I looked around and I had this overwhelming feeling of, I know this. It's like I had an answer. I understand this. The crop circle looked completely incongruous within its environment, but at the same time, it looked precisely like it was supposed to be there. And I had this serene feeling where I had this thing of, my ancestors understood what this means, and it's really simple and it's really beautiful, but I can't quite grasp it.
It's interesting because it doesn't do that to any of our theories. What you're saying here doesn't strike me in a way where I go, oh, this doesn't fit. How do I make this puzzle piece fit? It fits pretty comfortably, actually, because we kind of suspect here on our show that much of like the technological advancements, that if you believe in that idea that the government is, several decades ahead of us technologically speaking, and then we get a slow roll. So if we have the iPhone, they have something else that's exponentially superior to the iPhone. And so we suspect that what happens is human beings are motivated by something outside of themselves to engage in something. And I think that trope even goes back to pagan mythologies that attribute advancements in technology, and I'm using technology in the sense of let's say, for example, like agriculture would have been attributed to one god, metallurgy would have been attributed to another god, and it just seems that there is an inspiration and a teaching that is imparted on us, and then we are the mechanism that makes it appear in our physical realm. And so when it comes to people being motivated one way or another or inspired to create something that then seemingly takes on a meaning that the individuals who created it never meant to impart on their creation, that doesn't at all not fit. In fact, it's almost glaringly consistent with that.
Yeah, there's another part of that timeline, which is, I'm not sure if I can get my head around this, but a circle maker said to me something which I thought that could be the case, because when we had the basic circles, the really simple ones that looked like the birthed UFOs, they were very, very simple. But it looked as if something had come down and span it and then gone back up again. Okay. Really basic, like it was like a vortex. And my friend said to me, this is a little bit like when people get in a trance state, or they have readings with spiritualists or on a Ouija board. This thing comes through. It's got only enough energy to expend to go through this veil, so to speak. Then it's exhausted, and then it stays for a bit and says, "I'm tired," and goes away. He said that's kind of like what was happening with those first really simple circles. And he said, do you think it could be that that was like a recruitment drive for us to say, well, we could do better than that? And then the second that we do, it stays within its realm and says, right, I've got you now.
Yeah, it's like I don't know, the 1996 Windows computer somehow begot Grok. You know, the AI that's now telling me everything I need to know about everything. It's like, it's like, here's a little tidbit, not even a computer, you know, like a rudimentary calculator. It's like, here's a little something. And then people take it, they run with it. And it's like, maybe that's the direction that we were always supposed to run with this thing that was given to us. But D, I wanted to ask you one more question because we have to get out of here in a minute. We have another guest coming on at 1. Damn. But I know.
I still have so many other. Go on.
Yeah, I get that a lot. Don't worry.
Well, we have to have you back on again, especially when your book is finalized. So we could. I want a copy at least.
Okay.
Why do you think you are doing this right now? You've hung up your crop circle boots. It seems like a decade ago, but you're back in it. Yeah. Now you're back in. And you're doing this endeavor, but why right now? Because all of this stuff is happening right now at the same time, and it seems like you've been poked and nudged again to continue your efforts in a different manner.
Okay, I tried to do this in 2018 with a musician friend of mine who's quite a famous musician, and he said, "I'm getting all this stuff at home, exactly what you're talking about, guys. You know." And he said we shouldn't be doing this. And I looked last year and saw we'd had the worst ever record of crop circles, and none of them were any good. I think 2 were good. And I had this feeling where I thought, whatever the phenomena is, it's as if it's failed and given up because it got bored of the infighting and the politics, and it's gone away. So I don't feel I'm doing any harm, and this is the right time to do it because the phenomenon seems to have like dissipated and gone. So now's the time to talk about it. I could be wrong. There could be 60 this year. I don't know, but it just feels like certain jigsaw pieces have fitted together in my life to say, well, why not now? You've run out of excuses not to do this now, and it's kind of dissipating anyway. So you're not doing any harm, and people should know about it. Because nobody talks about this part of the phenomena. I've got friends that have been knocked off lecture circuits. You know, people say I'm not going to do a tour if Rob Buckle's on my tour because he's talking about supernatural stuff in human circles. You know, we're ostracized. It's follow the money, isn't it? We're not giving people what they want to hear. But I just think it's kind of the right time.
Okay, so this is probably gonna be the final question because we got to get out of here. But cool. Is it fair to characterize this as you are a participant in something, and I would say an unwilling participant, only just in the sense that you don't know exactly the thing that you set out to do, and so in that way you cannot give. You can't give like fully informed consent, right? And this thing thereby is obscuring its agenda to you, and obscure by omission is still, obscuring, right? It's just not telling you, but it is moving you. And I'm very comfortable with that idea. I don't disbelieve that at all. I think that that's probably exactly what's going on in the vast majority of cases. And then still there's room for this other thing to be happening where they might be coming down somehow and doing this. But the question that I have is, if we can characterize your part in this as such, uninformed consent and an obscuring of the agenda, then is there room in your mind for this thing that moves you to not have, not necessarily your best interests in mind, but humanity's?
I don't know. We were just compelled to do it, and I tried for my intent to be good and not to put bad symbols in there. But that's the bit that I really am not comfortable with. And it's kind of why I'm glad one of the reasons I'm not doing it anymore. You know, and that's when I'm doing the Substack, I do step back and sometimes I say, should you be doing this because you're attracting whatever this is? You know, that's the answer.
Have you?
That's fair.
This is coming from my background, but have you ever thought about using the name of Jesus Christ when you're if you feel like you need to talk about this, maybe using that name to we've heard from a bunch of people that that name stops these experiences in its tracks. It's not just me. I mean, I'd say probably 30 people that have come on this show have told us their own experience. David has had his own experience with it, where that's
Let's
worked
say
out.
to stop you mentioned earlier there was like poltergeist-esque activity in your own home, which you weren't too much of a fan of.
No, I haven't. I tend to like try and not put myself in the fire eyes and not do anything that might provoke whatever this is by putting the wrong symbols down or writing the wrong stories. You know, that's the answer. I'm very wary if that answers your question.
D, I'd be very interested in having a continuing dialogue with you. Whatever you're doing here and the work that you're exposing on your Substack, I think it's very important, especially if the larger UFO community, or at least the crop circle community, a subsect of it, isn't readily accepting this information or allowing you to present it or anything like that. I'd be very interested in having you back. I would also recommend, D, give a listen to a couple of our last episodes on the topic of the telepathy tapes. You might find something interesting. I don't know what, but you might find something interesting in some of those episodes. And as far as how it applies to this phenomenon and some of the stories you may have heard from your peers who are engaging in this sort of thing. And I don't know what you'll find, but you might find some sort of clarity. But unfortunately, we have to bring it in for a land. It's a fascinating conversation, D. And I just want to thank you for, number one, bringing the time out. I know we had all those technical difficulties when we started.
Yeah, that was weird.
It was very weird. And I'm very happy that we managed to get back in here and get this done. And I know that this is not something that even the UFO community, which you would imagine would welcome you with open arms, they're not too pumped about this narrative. So not an easy thing to share. And I want to thank you for doing that at all. So one more time, D, where can people find your work so they can go and check this out?
Yeah, just go into the Substack, which is It Can't Be People, and you'll find me there.
All right, awesome, man. I have all of your I have your link here in the description, and when this episode comes out in full, it will be in the description as well. On the Patreon, it'll be there. So guys, go click on that. I'm gonna put my email in here after and become a subscriber. Follow D's work. This is strange stuff, man.
I think it's important though, man. I think it's really important.
We speak to like people who do really strange things, and this is like it's obscure because it's not that strange, but it's like for me, this episode was really, I don't know.
It's a fascinating piece of this puzzle that I do admit fits really well, and so yeah, I mean, if the UAP community doesn't necessarily want to go there, we're happy to. So you're definitely welcome back, D.
Thanks,
we'll
guys.
have to do it again.
Okay, good luck. Thanks very much, guys. Bye.
Thanks for your time. And guys, we'll be back in 10 minutes with Ed Mabry. Don't forget to obey, submit, and comply. See ya in 10 minutes.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real.
You can persuade people that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see. You can't. Because